What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football, sports betting, and NASCAR home. Brian Twining is joining me, as always. And Brian, we haven't done this in a while, but we're going to talk some fantasy football today.
Man, as much as I was kind of unprepared for football just maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago, just having focus solely on NASCAR and, kind of taking a break from stuff. I'm ready to dive in, man. Just having the draft over and like going over initial rankings, I'm ready for football season already.
Yeah, ditto. As Brian mentioned, we do preview every single NASCAR race from a DFS and betting perspective. So if that's something that would interest you, make sure you check that out. As we were going to try and rip through a bunch of stuff over the course of the offseason, not only fantasy related, we're going to talk quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, all that good stuff, faces, new places, all the people to avoid. But we're also going to talk some betting, and Brian and I are going to jump over in a bit and talk some win totals, both for the NFC and the AFC. So if that interests you, make sure you go check those videos out. And you can get access to all of our videos, know when we post new stuff and when we go live. If you mash that thumbs up on our videos, you hit subscribe, and you hit the bell notification. It takes you all of 3 seconds to do those things, and it really does do a lot to help us help get the content shared around. If you know somebody who is interested in fantasy or interested in betting, please send them our way or us their way, however you want to do it. Have them check out our content, because Brian and I work really hard on this, and we would love to get as many eyeballs to it. And if there's something you would like to see, if there was something you don't agree with, in those comments below, let us know what you think. Let us know, we're going to talk some quarterbacks today. If there's somebody that we totally missed the boat on, let us know below. We're here to reevaluate. We got time. That's why we're jumping in now. So by the time August rolls around, we love where our rankings are at. We're very comfortable with our evaluations, and we're ready to dominate the fantasy season and win some more trophies. I got a couple behind me over there. I'm very excited about having those sitting there all season long, and I'm going to do my best to make sure they sit there for the foreseeable future. But Brian, we got 3 quarterbacks I want to talk about today, because I think they're incredibly interesting for fantasy. I think there's some question marks about all 3, and then we'll jump in and look at our rankings as of right now and see where our heads are at. You included a couple of guys that I did not, and vice versa. So we'll be able to continue that conversation, and we'll look at some ADP and all that good stuff. So with that being said, let's dive in. Let's talk about your boy Dakota. Dak Prescott was absolutely balling out last year. Only ended up starting 5 games and really played more like 4.5. But on his 222 attempts, threw for 1,856 yards. His 9 touchdowns was actually underwhelming for his number of attempts. He's usually a guy that sits in the kind of 5 to 6% touchdown rate, and he was at 4.1, which means he probably should have been at like 11 or 12 through his number of attempts. He had 4 picks. Also ran it a little bit, 18 carries, 93 yards. Not really running in terms of yardage as much, but still getting those rushing touchdowns, which out of a quarterback is always amazing to see. So if you kind of extrapolate that over 16 games, you're looking at about 666 attempts, over 5,500 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 12 picks. Like I mentioned, the touchdown should probably be a little bit higher. Maybe the yards are a little bit lower. Maybe it should be like 5,200. And then rushing for about 280 yards and 6 touchdowns. If you put all those numbers in, he is your quarterback 1 in 2020. That being said, Brian, while we love what they're doing, we love the direction the Cowboys are going, he's got so many weapons. I think he's going to be somebody that's interesting for a lot of people, because he either you rank him as the guy we saw in the first 5 weeks who was absolutely dominant and is kind of in that top 3-4 mix. Like, I don't know if anyone's going to top Mahomes or rank him that way at least. But the injury is concerning.
Yes.
He's had a long time to recover, so in theory he should be fully healthy. But if you have pause there, if you have question marks there, maybe you drop him lower. Maybe you think maybe a little more Zeke. But you're a Cowboys fan. You watch this team closely. Where's your head at going into 2021 and Dak Prescott's fantasy outlook?
Dak was a guy who we've been kind of banging the drum probably since we started recording these shows for fantasy football. I mean, he's been so underappreciated in the fantasy realm. I mean, every year he was posting, top 8, top 7 numbers from the fantasy quarterback position while being drafted outside the starter range for the most part in one quarterback leagues. And now, last year, like you said, those first couple of games, he was on pace to annihilate records in terms of fantasy scoring from like the passing perspective, and adding those 6 rushing touchdowns, projected would have been amazing. Looking ahead to this season, coming off of that injury, I know they're saying he's ahead of schedule, blah, blah, blah. But looking back at 2019 for a full season, he did only rush for 3 touchdowns, which was, I think he had averaged like 5 or 6 each of the previous 3 years. So you saw them kind of get away from him being relied upon as much near the goal line. It was more Zeke. Now Tony Pollard kind of showed out last year. So I think you're going to see more of the running game, like the backs getting usage inside the 5-10 yard line than them relying on the read option and letting Dak do his thing. And with all those guys on the outside, why is he going to take off and run how are you not going to have one of those 3 absolute studs on the outside get open against teams who more than likely only have 2 good corners? So, Dak, for me, you'll see it in my rankings. I don't think he's quite there with a Mahomes, with a Kyler Murray, who we saw rush for double-digit touchdowns. But he's right there in the mix for kind of that the back end of the top tier, very beginning of the second tier quarterbacks.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the thing, right? Is what's his upper echelon for rushing and rushing touchdowns? Like, I think he's a guy that, as you mentioned, maybe doesn't run for as many touchdowns, but maybe 4 or 5. But that's still incredible. That's kind of what Russell Wilson does every year, and he's kind of in that 4 to 7 range. So I think that's a pretty fair kind of estimate. But as you mentioned, the introduction of Tony Pollard, who is a dynamic player in the passing game. Obviously Blake Jarwin to go with CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper. Like, yes, I think the rushing production comes back a little bit, but there's so many freaking playmakers, big playmakers. Amari Cooper going for 80 yards and a score. Michael Gallup taking it for 60 yards. CeeDee Lamb taking it for a 15-yard in, going all the way to the house. Like, those plays are going to be sprinkled in there that I think you kind of make up for the difference for what his potential could be. Looking over at ADP has adjusted per Fantasy Football Calculator. He is the QB4, which I feel like is probably a good range to start considering him. Neither of us really love drafting quarterbacks early, but Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray is kind of your top 3. And then the next group with Dak and Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then over on my fantasy league, did some recent ADP for them in 12-team leagues, and he's QB6, which I think is very interesting, behind Justin Herbert, behind Lamar Jackson, which I think it really feels like outside of really Mahomes, I think there's going to be a wide range of options and people leaning which way or the other. I think, especially as the offseason rolls along, kind of tiering these guys up will be really good for us.
Yep.
Because, as you mentioned, is he closer to the Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, whoever else you want to put in that tier? Or is he in that next group with maybe, we'll see what happens with Deshaun Watson. We'll see what happens with Aaron Rodgers. Brian and I both ranked those 2 guys as in they're starting week 1 with the Texans and Packers respectively. If things change, our ranks will change. And then I think for us, I think we're going to want to have a conversation with what do we do with Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts. We're going to talk Hurts in a little bit, just because I think he's so compelling. But like that whole rookie clap, and then Tua, who Brian, I'm gonna ask you a question towards the end of a guy that maybe missed the boat for you, but for me, Tua is becoming somebody that I'm talking myself into, and it's a combination of potential upside plus, pay basically draft day price. So that is somewhere where my head is going. So I'll just give you a little glimpse into the messed up nature that is my noggin, but yeah, I think it's really going to be a compelling season for Dak. I think he's somebody that I think his range of outcomes. He has that QB1 upside with the safety of a guy. He should be in that 7 to 10 range. I think at worst, unless he gets hurt again. Like I don't see a scenario where he plays 16 games and he's QB14,
No.
unless just like every rookie and all these guys just ball out.
Yeah, I mean, he has a pretty safe floor when it comes to drafting a quarterback. It's just basically like you said, it's going to be determined on in which tier is he being drafted in once we kind of get established the ADP of these guys.
Yeah.
Because if he's getting taken, as the third or fourth guy in those first handful of rounds, his value may not be there when it comes to having to decide between him and the next tier of dudes like a Lamar, like a Watson or an A-Rod. Like it's really going to be determined on where he's being drafted.
Right. And so for example, I'm looking at ADP right now and he's kind of in that end of the fourth, early part of the fifth range, around names like Allen Robinson, who I'd prefer, Chris Godwin, who I'd prefer, his teammate CD Lamb. There's some, that's kind of the Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Kareem Hunt, Raheem Mostert, Melvin Gordon range if you're looking at running backs. So that's going to be the other discussion, and that's obviously a big part of why Brian and I tend to venture to other options much lower. But if you want rock solid production, if you want a guy you're going to be able to put in for basically, the entire season, assuming he doesn't break his leg or something, throw Dak in there. You're going to feel really good about him each and every week. His weekly upside is QB1, and his downside, unless they have a terrible weather game or it's just like they blow them out, he's going to be a guy that you're going to want to start each and every week. So if that's what you're looking for in a quarterback, Dak Prescott is absolutely somebody that you should be looking at. And kind of, I don't know about you, Brian, but kind of my philosophy in general is to make a list of the quarterbacks I would be comfortable with going into week one. And at what point does that line start? Some people, Ryan Tannehill and Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts don't make that cut. Other people are willing to drop down to the, Matthew Stafford, Cam Newton, Ben Roethlisberger, like wherever that line is for you, figure that out and then just start scratching off as you go through your draft. But if you're like, I want an elite guy where I can pay maybe a little bit of a discount. Maybe I'm not, I don't want to get Mahomes. I don't want Josh Allen or Kyler Murray might be round 2 or round 3, and I want to wait a little bit longer. And, every league's going to be different, so you're going to know your league too. But I think Dak's super rock solid and somebody that I'm very interested in.
For sure.
Let's shift over and talk about Lamar Jackson. Really a tale of two seasons. 2019 was his incredible MVP, number one quarterback in fantasy, rushed for 1,200 yards, threw for another 3,000. People really expected him to have another really strong season. And, I don't know. He ran for 1,000 yards. He threw for 2,700, combined for, 35 touchdowns, or 33 touchdowns. I know from a compared to 2019 stat, you feel a little underwhelmed, especially if you paid, for a second or third round draft price, which is about what he was going heading into last season. So it might have left a bad taste in your mouth. And I have a group chat full of friends that play fantasy football, and I always like to ask questions in there to get a general consensus, because there's some hardcore, diving into the numbers right now. There's some people that won't pick up anything until August, and it's usually a magazine or something. And then some people that are kind of in between. So it's always a good, barometer for where people's heads are at heading into the season. And I said, which quarterbacks are you guys most worried about or most concerned about? And if you're watching this show, let us know in the comments the quarterback that you're most concerned or you're most on the fence about heading into 2021, because I'm always interested to see where the community is as a whole. But Lamar was the name that instantly came up with a couple people. So Brian, I guess for you, this was a guy obviously I was excited about. I think it was my quarterback one heading into the year. That was dumb. I should just pencil in Mahomes and not worry about that. But where are you at with Lamar? Like, what, is it good as gold, or are you going, maybe there is reason to be a little concerned?
I mean, again, like looking at a guy like Lamar Jackson, what he provides on the ground, he's another safe guy where even if he puts up a game where he throws for 160 yards and say no touchdowns and an interception, he's probably going to get you 70, 80 rushing yards with the potential of a score. So, I mean, you're looking at guaranteed double-digit fantasy points out of your quarterback every single week, which, yeah, that's not what you're looking for. But in terms of boom or bust potential too, when looking at what Baltimore has done this offseason, I mean, they're beefing up their skill positions. I mean, Marquise Brown, hopefully he's healthy. Hollywood Brown, hopefully he's fully healthy. They got Rashad Bateman in the draft. Like, they're looking to load up on weapons for Lamar.
Yeah.
After a season that saw him still put up, really good numbers, ran for 1,000 yards once again. I think this guy, for me, you'll see it in my rankings. He's much like Dak. He's right there with those number one guys, which are the Mahomes, the Kyler Murray, and the Josh Allens in terms of what he can provide in fantasy. And if you can get him at a discount this year, I think this is the year where he's going to pay dividends depending on where you're able to draft him.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the Ravens are putting pieces in around him. They obviously drafted Rashad Bateman. They also brought in Sammy Watkins, who, I don't love Watkins from a season long, but as a piece that could help him in certain weeks, help him open up stuff for Mark Andrews, open up stuff for the running game. Like, I think it's a good addition and it's something that from a real football standpoint makes a lot of sense.
Exactly.
So I like that they're improving that. Obviously, they made some tweaks along the offensive line, so we'll see how that pans out. But as you mentioned, he's over on Fantasy Football Calculator. He is going as the QB7 after Dak, after Aaron Rodgers, after Russell Wilson. That feels like a good range for him.
Yes.
And in some leagues, he's going to fall a little bit further than that.
Exactly.
Because of the question marks, because of the uneasiness with some of the owners. So maybe last year we were a little too aggressive, and now we've found I think we're going to find a happy medium. I think he's very much in that Dak Prescott tier of a guy who should be safe, especially with that rushing ability. Like, he's never, especially if you're in a league that's 4 points for a passing touchdown, he's going to be a little more valuable there than a pure passer. And then hopefully he shows you some of that passing improvement along with the weapons that they've added to kind of take that next step as a passer and become a more well-rounded option. But as a fantasy option, as somebody that I would be considering drafting, I think he makes a hell of a lot of sense and would be definitely, if I'm sitting in there, if I'm sitting in drafts and he kind of falls a little bit to me, I could be definitely on board because he has that QB1 upside. Like, that's in his range of outcomes, and that's always something when I'm drafting a quarterback that I'm like, obviously it's nice to have a rock solid guy each and every week who's going to be a solid QB7. But if you're drafting him higher, you want the QB1 upside. And Lamar absolutely brings that.
Yeah, I mean, and looking at his numbers, he had a 7% touchdown rate last year, which last year was considered a bad season.
Yeah,
for most people for Lamar Jackson. And as much crap as I talk, like I still don't think he's a great passer of the ball. They go down the field. Like, he's averaging, double-digit yards per attempt, per completion, all this kind of stuff. And the fact that he had a down year going into a season where he's now entering his third year starting, I think this year will be kind of that, like, level up thing that
Yeah.
happens with him, kind of like we've seen with the Josh Allens, with like Kyler Murray entering his third season. I mean, what are we going to see out of a guy like that too? It normally takes a few years for these guys starting to be able to kind of show everything that they have.
Yeah, and his touchdown rate of 9.1% was aggressive. Like that, no quarterback who's above basically 9% ever stays right there. And to actually, typically they fall to like 4 or 5%, which is concerning. So for Lamar to stay at 6 plus give you that safety of the rushing floor, like I think last year is a reasonable expectation with his ability to outperform that. And be freaking awesome. So
I was just gonna say, last year might be his floor season.
Yeah, like if things don't go perfect, that's kind of what you should expect. And then obviously, and he has the boom weeks too, right? He has the weeks where he could run for 150, throw for 350, and score 5 touchdowns, and almost single-handedly win you a week. And when you're in head-to-head matchups, that kind of upside is going to be critical. Like, we're going to talk about, there's guys like Matthew Stafford or Carson Wentz or Derek Carr who are fine in their streaming options, but go later for a reason because their upside each week is not as high as someone like him. Somebody that I'm going to be incredibly interested in, and if he falls to me at the right spots, I feel like I'll have a lot of, is Jalen Hurts, which is wild to say because that coming into last season, I did not think we would be doing this, but if you look at his kind of, once again, we're extrapolating. I don't love to do that because the season's wild. They learn new things. Things happen. There's weeks where they don't run this. They run it more effectively. They don't throw as well. But this is a guy who is Lamar Jackson light. If he would have played 16 games, we're looking at 3,700 yards. We're looking at almost 1,000 yards rushing and, around 30 touchdowns total. So he would have been QB6, QB7, QB8, depending on your league scoring rules. So a guy that is going, that has, kind of the reliability. I don't want to say safety because we've seen a handful of starts, and it didn't go as well as the season went along. But this is another team, Brian, who is doing the right things to put pieces in place to help this guy be successful. I think a lot of teams are looking at what Buffalo did last year or 2 years ago or last year and brought in Stephon Diggs, who fits really well with Josh Allen. And they brought in these pieces and said, hey, this is what our quarterback does really well. Let's bring in options that fit in with that. And you look at Jalen Hurts, not only do they have Jalen Reagor, who I still think is a good player and expect to see a lot more from, but they brought in Devonta Smith, who not only has a connection to Jalen when they both were at Alabama, but he fits really well as a guy who can spread the field, who can go down the field, and then Jalen rip it to him. And then it should open up other stuff for Reagor, for Dallas Goedert, for Miles Sanders out of the backfield. So there's a lot of pieces here that I'm definitely interested in. And I feel like Hurts is a guy that could take a leap as a quarterback and kind of be in that Dak, Lamar kind of tier 2, tier 3 among quarterbacks.
Wow. That is an extremely bold statement. I'm not quite as high on him as you are. I still think that he does have the potential to finish as a QB1, as you'll see in my rankings. But looking into the fact that they have a first-year head coach, Jalen Hurts did not show the greatest as a passer at the end of last season. I mean, he was right around a 50% completion mark for his starts, which is not something that you can really have success with in the NFL. It's the rushing upside for him that really does propel him into that QB1 conversation and to the reason why you would say, and he has the possibility of kind of entering that second tier. Because with the drafting of Devonta Smith, Jalen Reagor, another season there, finally no more of this stupid tight end rotation with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, hopefully. The addition of Kerryon Johnson to help with the backfield with Miles Sanders. I think Jalen Hurts is kind of the wild card that if he's one of my favorite kind of weight options at quarterback, like we normally do, you and I. Let everyone else get their guy, and then Jalen Hurts will probably be sitting there in like the 14th round, as your first quarterback if you're in a 1 QB league, and then
Yeah.
you have a guy who's putting up startable numbers every week.
So I'm really interested to see where his ADP falls, because I think right now there's a lot more industry people, a lot more hardcore people setting this ADP. I think as we approach the season, I could see his ADP falling a little bit. Right now, over on Fantasy Football Calculator, he is the QB 12, right behind Burrow and Ryan Tannehill, right ahead of Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford. I think that whole range is really compelling. And I think depending on who your league mates are, they might lean, Matt Ryan or Matt Stafford. They might lean more of the rusher, depending on your league scoring. Over on my fantasy league, he is going as QB 11, right in front of Tannehill, Stafford, Fields, right behind Lawrence, Rodgers, and Burrow. And I tried to set it for redraft. It still feels like it's throwing in some rookie drafts, which I don't love. But hey, maybe Trevor Lawrence is just that interesting option for people over on my fantasy league. And
those people are insane. Let me just come out with that right now.
Okay, Brian. So we ran through those three options. I think we should throw our rankings up on the screen, and I'll go first. So as you can see, Mahomes number 1, Josh Allen number 2. I have Dak number 3. Big fan. I think what we saw in the first 4 weeks is something we should be expecting. Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, Lamar. Like, for me, honestly, it's Mahomes in a tier of himself, and then 2 through all the way to probably 7 are kind of in a cluster, and depending on what your league does and how you feel about each guy, you can be a little more, a little less aggressive. But I think they all have the QB1 upside. I think they all have tremendous potential. And then kind of that next tier with Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Aaron Rodgers, as I mentioned, I like him quite a bit, but that touchdown rate that we saw a year ago is unsustainable. And I expect a little regression in that. And if you knock his touchdown percentage from last year down to, say, 7 or 6, even 6%, which is kind of baseline, but still really, really good. He's a kind of a 35 touchdown guy instead of 41, which makes him, middle of the pack. So Aaron Rodgers is my QB 10. Tannehill never gets enough love. I think he is my new Dak Prescott, as a guy who always outproduces his ADP.
I'll continue to pat my back about Ryan Tannehill.
And I'm really curious. Like, he is somebody that I'm going to be interested. Obviously, right now the Titans, we'll see what they're doing at receiver. There's been some Julio Jones rumors. There's been some. They need something opposite AJ Brown, or AJ Brown's going to get 200 targets, and he should be drafted as the wide receiver 1. And then Tom Brady. I vastly underrated him last year.
Yep.
He was awesome. I expect him to be awesome once again. I mean, maybe he falls off the table, and if you don't want to be a part of that, then I maybe avoid the Bucs kind of as a whole. But when you have as many talented weapons as he does, it's hard to keep him out of your top 12. Let's shift our focus, Brian, and look at your rankings and kind of look at some of the differences as you a lot of the same names mixed in. Kind of where was your head at when you were organizing these names?
Well, I had a really hard time, because I really think that this is the season that we're going to see kind of the maturation of Kyler Murray in that offense. So I do think that he has the opportunity this year to overtake Mahomes and Josh Allen as the QB1, but just looking at the skill set and the weapons around them, how do you not rank Patrick Mahomes number 1? Like I said, Lamar Jackson, I love him this season. I think he's a tremendous value in redraft and, best ball drafts. I think he's probably my favorite QB in that top 6 range right there, as much as I love my boy Dak. And then going towards the back end, much like you, I vastly underrated what Tom Brady was going to be able to do last season and the Bucs as a whole. I think that we're going to see close to another 40 touchdown year with him, just with the weapons that he has on the outside and everybody returning, and the addition of the mustache, Gio Bernard. And then Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow has a chance to kind of kind of pick up where he left off last year before he got injured and see them throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game. I mean, the sky is the limit, or the sky is the roof, as MJ said, for Joe Burrow. So I think he has a great opportunity to even sneak into that top 6 range. And then Matthew Stafford going to LA with Sean McVay's offense. I think we're going to get to see the good Matthew Stafford with a tremendous running game to boot as well with the Rams. So I think that's going to pay dividends for him. And then Jalen Hurts, like I said, back end QB1.
A couple things. Joe Burrow, I might be vastly underrating and might be somebody that I need to move into my top 12. Jamar Chase is a freaking rock star, and to have him and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd and a talented running game with Joe Mixon, that offense could be scary and the defense could be bad, so he could be throwing a lot. And very much like Deshaun Watson last year. So I might need to reevaluate that. He was definitely somebody that was hard for me to leave out. And then Matthew Stafford, I like Matthew Stafford as a Lion when he was just Kenny Golladay, but now he's in a better system with a better offensive coordinator and really talented pass catchers, and somehow I like him less. I don't know what's wrong with me. I
will say the Matthew Stafford that we loved played for a team whose defense was non-existent and was consistently throwing jump balls to guys like Calvin Johnson, Kenny Golladay. But now in this offense, I do think we see his efficiency kind of skyrocket, and he's going to get into that. He could have one of those 7 to 9% touchdown kind of ranges for his year with how efficient McVay's offenses run. Having Cam Akers and I always forget his damn name, Malcolm Brown, I think. Well,
Malcolm Brown is now in Miami. So.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
But yeah, no, it's the Cam Akers.
Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson in the backfield.
I'm curious to see, like you mentioned, Stafford in a much more structured environment, an offense where he's not going to have to throw it 50 times a game. Obviously, they'll be able to do that when they have to, but I could see, and I could see part of his production. Thanks for helping me prove my point that he shouldn't be in the top 12. But he's super safe, super reliable. But I don't know that he has that QB1, but that's why he's, at the back end of yours and just missed my rankings. Brian, was there anybody that you were like, was hard for you to leave out, or somebody who just missed the cut that you could see yourself as the offseason rolls along, getting more interested in potentially, replacing Stafford or replacing somebody else kind of in that back 2 or 3 names?
Well, it's going to be two guys that you have in yours, and that's Ryan Tannehill. Since he's been with Tennessee, he's been one of my favorite quarterbacks. I mean, just in terms of NFL, even taking fantasy out of the conversation, and then Justin Herbert for the Chargers. I'm interested to see what they do under a new regime. They got most of their pass catchers coming back, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. That defense should be a lot better for the Chargers, so I do think we're going to see them not having to throw the ball as much slightly. I'm just interested to see what Justin Herbert brings to the table in his second year.
Yeah, Herbert's going to be somebody that I think I'm going to be excited to watch, but not going to really have on any of my teams. Because I feel like especially after the Rookie of the Year and all that stuff, I feel like he'll go a little bit more higher than I'm more comfortable. Like over on FF Calculator, he is going in front of Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow, Ryan Tannehill, Jalen Hurts, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford.
That's crazy.
For me, he's in that cluster, and I'm not going to take a quarterback first that's in that cluster. And I think, for both of us, we should definitely, especially at quarterback, I think we should do some tiers and kind of chunk them up, because I think it will be really compelling. Because I feel like you could literally start at, Justin Herbert at number 8 and go all the way down to, I don't know, you could go down to 14 where Stafford is. You could go to 15 where Matt Ryan is. You could lump Carson Wentz in if you like him.
I was just going to say Carson Wentz is a very intriguing option as a former MVP candidate going to another, kind of like Matthew Stafford, going to a situation where this offense is predicated on the running game, which should open up a lot more opportunities for him to sit back and have time to throw the ball to a Michael Pittman.
And that was another team that was potentially tied to if Julio Jones is traded. They have a lot more salary cap flexibility, and if you put Julio Jones, Michael Pittman, T.Y. Hilton, their tight ends, like that passing game could be
Jonathan Taylor.
And as much as he sucks, as much as he's frustrating, Kirk Cousins is also somebody that is going probably later than he should. Especially if we think Justin Jefferson is that good, and Adam Thielen's going to be a rock star, and Irv Smith's going to take a step forward.
Yeah, finally.
I don't, nobody likes Kirk Cousins, but he's probably a lot closer to top 12 than he is than any of us want to give him credit for, and he showed again last year, and all that good stuff. All right, Brian, this was a lot of fun. Good to talk quarterbacks. As I mentioned, we will try and keep this conversation rolling as the offseason goes along and as stuff happens. If there's trades, if there's other stuff, we'll update and kind of give you guys an idea of where our heads are at. As I mentioned, Brian and I are going to hop over and talk some win totals here in a bit. So if you are interested in gambling and interested in NFL win totals, make sure you check that out. If you're interested in NASCAR DFS, make sure you check that out. Mash that thumbs up, mash that subscribe, and then in the comments, let us know the quarterback that that you think is going to be most polarizing, somebody that people are going to love or hate, or you're not sure what to do with in drafts. And I'm very curious to see what everybody has to say. So for Brian Twining, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.